Now, here's the most important part, especially when you're reaching out to successful people. They don't need your money. They don't need your praise. They don't need probably your connections. So a lot of guys won't do it because they're like, well, what can I do for that guy? Here's what you can do. Make him feel valuable. So this is the best feedback I will give to anybody who ever asks and gets advice from a potential mentor. Here it is, ready? I give you feedback. That's my gift to you. Kipp, what's up, man? Great to see you on this Monday morning.
Good. How's your Monday? Do you stay on top of
Good.
it? You're feeling good?
It's getting away from me a little bit. When I notice sometimes I'll schedule meetings in the morning. I'm like, why do I do that? I need time to like process what's going to happen throughout the afternoon's fine, but I did it to myself this morning and, but I've been productive. So that's good. I actually woke up this morning. I'm like, I'm not going into workout. And I laid in bed for half an hour and then I got up. I'm like, no, you're going in to work out. So I went in and I got my workout in, but then everything else was late because I was trying to be lazy at first.
Yeah, copy.
So
We have a short window, so we'll hop right into questions, or do you want to do headlines?
I actually do have a kind of a funny headline. And I also wanted to ask, because your son just had his first Jujitsu tournament.
Yeah, it was so fun.
That's awesome.
It was so fun.
It looked like he did great.
Yeah, he did awesome. He didn't lose a single match, took first.
Whoa.
He was Mr. just taking backs all over the place.
I saw that.
And it was funny too, because later in the day, he's like, I don't know why all those kids were giving me their back. And I was like,
it's like
proud dad moment. I'm like, well.
Oh, for sure. Such a great, humble example of humility right there.
Yeah. He's like, I don't know why they were doing that.
Why were they doing that?
I don't think they were, son. You were just getting it. Yeah. But he did awesome. It was his first tournament. He's 6. I was nervous. I didn't realize how nervous I was going to be. But I was super nervous for him. But
was he nervous?
No. He wasn't nervous at all. He was just having fun. Yeah. He did great. He did super great. Listened, which is really hard for a lot of kids to do. Like listening to me, right, as I'm coaching him. So he's constantly looking over, and I mean, he did. There's so many elements of it. I could talk for an hour about how impressed I was. So he did awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. When the greatest compliment I could ever get about one of my children is, and I get this about my oldest quite often actually, is that he's coachable.
Yeah.
I think to me that beats athleticism, hard work, grit, all of that. And I'm not saying that stuff is bad. Like you need that as well. But if I could choose one skill set that I look for and that I think will serve him better than anything else in life, it's that he's a coachable kid.
Yep. And that's exactly how he was. He was coachable. We had a game plan. We talked about our game plan, so it was great, man. It was super fun.
Well, you're bragging about your kids. I'm going to not brag about my kids and brag about myself for a minute.
Sounds good. That's right. You had your race.
I did a half marathon this weekend, and it was interesting. Highs and lows for sure. But the most I'd ever run in a single time was 6 miles about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, so you didn't get close. I mean, you doubled your max length for your half.
Well, I mean, no. But I'm saying 6 miles without stopping. That's the longest I've run. 6 miles without taking a break.
Okay.
And so I was running and I got to about mile 3. I'm like, oh, I feel pretty good. I know I can get to 6. Like, that's not an issue. Yeah. So I got to 6 and then I'm like, I still feel pretty good. Got to 7, got to 8. I'm like, maybe I can get to 10. And then I got to like 8.5. I'm like, maybe I can just do the whole thing without taking a break. And then I got to like 8 3/4 and I hit a wall. And I'm like, okay, I gotta get to 9 and then I gotta take a break. And I was actually afraid of stopping at 9 because I thought what would happen is my body would get stiff and I'd get cramped up. So I stopped at 9 and I walked, and sure enough, that's what happened. And it was like walk, run, walk, run, walk, run. The rest of the 4 miles, like it was, the last mile was rough, man. It was rough, but got it done, feel good, on the road to a marathon. So there's the first step. We'll see how it goes.
When's the marathon? Have you already registered?
October.
Okay,
I haven't
so
registered yet, but it's early October.
Okay, so you're doing the St. George Marathon because that's in October usually. Okay,
right.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes.
That was my first marathon.
Oh, was it?
Was St. George, yeah.
How many have you done?
Probably four or five.
Dang.
Yeah.
I plan on doing one and never again.
That's what I said, actually. I said one.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. You end up running a few more. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't envision that being the case, but we'll see. Anyways, I do have one headline that I think is kind of funny. And there's this video going around. It has been for the past week or so. And I think on X, I saw the other day, it had like 700 million views or something. Just an unreal, like completely viral, maybe the most viral video ever. And it's this guy doing his morning routine. Have you seen this video?
No.
It's funny? Hilarious.
Is it? Okay. Awesome.
It's I don't think he's trying to be funny. I think he's trying to be serious, but it's hilarious because it essentially starts at like 3:45 or something or 4 o'clock in the morning. And it doesn't end until almost 10 o'clock in the morning. So his morning routine is like a 5.5 hour routine that consists of waking up, stretching, going on the balcony, doing push-ups, coming in, sipping his fancy bottled water, dipping his face in a bowl of ice several times, rubbing a banana peel or something on his face, going to the gym, putting his jewelry on to go for a run, doing some journaling, sitting down, making some calls, doing some meditation.
Does this guy have a job?
I'm like, come on, dude. Like, yeah, he has a job making viral content that everybody clicks on.
Got it.
So he's actually working. That's like when people say, I retired early. You're like, well, what does that mean? So I just stopped working. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're a bum and you're homeless. You didn't just retire. I mean, I think maybe I'll retire today too, if that's all it requires.
Yeah. I retired already, but now I started working again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can you explain this gap of employment? Oh, yeah, I retired for a year and a half. Okay.
Yeah. Well played. That's funny.
Anyways, I laugh at it. You know, I'm sure the guy is just, the internet can be ruthless and just completely horrible. And I'm sure he's just hiding in a cave somewhere, or maybe he relishes in it. I don't know. Yeah. But I don't want to bust his balls too much. It's just, even with the work that we do, we put on these unrealistic expectations of what your life is supposed to be like. And then what ends up happening is we fall short of the 6-hour morning routine that we're quote unquote supposed to do. And then we think we're doing it wrong. You know, I just told you my morning routine was to wake up and sleep in for an extra half an hour before I dragged my ass out of bed to do what I said I was going to do. And I think that's more realistic for the men who listen and most men across the planet. Guys, just do what you can. You're not going to save the world. You can't do everything. I say get up, you know, get a workout in, whatever that workout looks to you. Get that workout in, maybe hydrate a little bit, spend some time with the people you love, eat some good food, and then get to work. I mean, maybe read a book or read the scriptures or pray if that's your thing. But I mean, I don't see why a morning routine should take any longer than an hour and a half to 2 hours if you're considering from the moment you get up to the moment you sit down at your desk to do work. But man, people make it way more complicated. They put on all of these false sort of expectations on others. And I think it's not helpful. If anything, it's the opposite.
We almost have an unhealthy relationship with it. Because we have this idea of the way it should be, and then it's like, oh, something's wrong, and then we add meaning to the fact that it's wrong, right? We'll even see the evidence of this in some of the questions today. It's kind of like, oh, well, when this happens, it's like, yeah, that's normal, right?
Right.
Don't make it mean something that it's not the way you think it should be.
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And look, there are things that should be.
Yeah.
And then there's things that are subject to interpretation. All right, let's hear those questions.
All right, Jeremy Kofi. So we're going to field questions from the Iron Council. Jeremy Kofi, Theodore Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. I'm often guilty of this. Are there healthy role comparisons can play in our individual journeys of improvement? Should we ever benchmark against others or objective standards? Comparison. Yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Yeah. Comparison's great. Like I love comparison because it shows you what's possible. You know, I'll give you another example from this run this weekend. So my girlfriend and I ran it, and I held her back. She could have probably taken a half an hour or more
finished,
off her time.
Came back, picked you up.
Yeah, she lapped me. She ran a marathon. She lapped me. You know, but what was interesting is when you get up to the starting line, they have people with these big yellow signs, and they were pacers. And so if you're going to run the marathon in an hour and a half, you're up front. If you're going to run it in 3 hours, you're in the back. Our goal was 2 hours and 40 minutes. Don't laugh. Okay, I know it's slow. Okay, guys, like I'll get there. Just take it for what it is. But he holds that sign, and that helps the person stay on pace with the time. And that's a benchmark that is a healthy benchmark, because it would be easy to fall behind on that if you're not paying attention to it. But another thing is just seeing what's possible. You know, Kipp, if you tell me, oh, I've run 4 marathons, I'm like, oh, cool. If Kipp can do that, then I can do that too. And it gives me hope and encouragement and optimism. And that's when comparison is healthy. When it's unhealthy is when you say, well, Ryan, yeah, I've run 4 marathons. And my internal dialogue is now, I could never do that. Kipp's better than me. I'm a piece of shit because I'm not as good as Kipp at running marathons, or whatever story I bring up in my mind. And that's where comparison trap becomes the thief of joy. But if you look, and that's the litmus test. If you look around and you see a person doing something and it motivates you, it inspires you, it drives you to take action, powerful. Take advantage of it. If it demotivates you, it's uninspiring, it creates negative stories in your mind, you have to purge that from your life and maybe even shut that down or that off, because you do not want that stuff migrating into other aspects of your life.
Yeah, spot on. Comparison, what I wrote in my notes here is comparison without critical thinking is the thief of joy. It's when we make it mean something, right? And you gave the one example of like, I'm a piece of crap in comparison, but other people do it the opposite, and they'll use it to justify an inaction, saying, oh, well, Ryan runs it, but he was raised different. He has other benefits than I've ever had. And then I use it as an excuse to be okay with where I'm at the same exact time. So we got to critically think and compare, and then determine how that moves you, believing and having some growth mindset and some confidence in yourself to determine the best route, right? But if we're looking to compare to justify a state, both negative or positive, that's probably where we start getting sideways.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Chris Henningsen. I'm currently helping start a men's ministry at my church. How does your faith guide your life? And how active are you in your faith? What would you look for in a men's ministry at your church?
I'm not real active in my faith. You know, I do have faith. I have faith in God and a creator, and I believe he has his hand in my life. And I've been open about my struggles with my faith and the belief and all of that. So I'm not super active in that. I will say I've been to some great churches where I feel like they really care about men. They want to uplift men. They want to edify them, support them in being real, genuine men. And I've been to churches that are antithetical to that, where they dismiss masculinity and they don't present a healthy set of data or information around what it means to be a good man, and that they try to squash masculinity, or they try to tamp it down and subdue it and talk to men as if they're women and treat them like women and ask them to behave like women. And of course, it's no surprise to me that that's going to be a huge turnoff for men. It is interesting to see, though, that the Eastern Orthodox Church, I believe, is one of the largest growing churches, specifically as it regards to young men. And if you look at Orthodox churches like that, I mean, they are not at a lack for structure and accountability and a precise way of doing things. It's very intense. And so it's surprising to me that a young generation of men is flocking to that. But I think it speaks to the need of discipline, commitment, the not softening language to make people feel better, to having a set of principles that you're willing to stand by and stand on. And I think that those are great things when you're looking to build or develop a ministry, either on your own or within your current church congregation. But the one thing that I think a lot of churches and ministries are missing is the manly activities. Yeah. You know, sure, we should show up to church and we should listen to the gospel and we should talk about it and we should hear from other people about it and we should be taught and we should be open to those ideas. But we also need to go fight each other and go shoot things and do community service and go sweat and lift together and go help the guy move from one part of town to another, or go to jujitsu, or go on that grueling hike, or maybe go run the half marathon together as a men's group. And sure, you can infuse the gospel in the discussion while you're doing those things. But I think more than anything, the way you get man to band together is twofold. One is towards a common objective or against a common enemy. And if all you're doing is talking about it, I don't really think that does it for guys. But if you want to go tackle that 10-mile hike together, that's a common objective. And now you're going to be pushing each other, holding each other accountable, training for it, preparing for it, because you don't want to be the weak link when you go do the thing. And that physical realm is something that so many ministries are missing when it comes to men, that I wish more of them would. And you would see church attendance rise in those ministries that are missing it.
Totally. Yeah, I can't stand the 30,000-foot theoretical gospel conversations. They just drive me mad. I'm always like, okay, got it. What does that look like today? What are we dealing with?
Right.
Like, let's get to brass tacks here. Because I just struggle with, I just feel like we're just talking circles and then everyone walks away and then the impact is minimal. One thing that Chris said, and I find this interesting, and maybe it's a fun share. He says, how does your faith guide you in your life? Yeah, I love to reverse engineer things constantly. And I think obviously if we're religious and spiritual, it is part of our life, right? It's not about, well, it's, applicable when it comes to the ministry at church. It's like, no, it should be applicable like right now, constantly, every day.
If it's a principle.
Yeah,
sure.
Totally. And as an example of that, constantly, right? I'll reverse engineer gospel principles and say, okay, what does this look like at work? So here's an example. It's probably about 2 weeks ago, right? I was listening to, I was in gospel study and we were going over the importance of like being a light of Christ, right? And the individual speaking, it was really great. It was about teaching youth. And he said something to the extent of, you can't rely on excitement to draw youth in. It won't ever be enough because you're competing with the other exciting things in the world. Right. And you need to invite the Spirit, and it's the Spirit that draws them in, not you, not your excitement, not your cookies, not your, fun lesson. It has to be the Spirit. And I was like, totally agree. But as I walked away and I was on my way home from church, I was like, what is that? Like, what is that from a psychology perspective, right? If I take that same exact principle outside of a gospel setting and I say, hey, I want to draw people in. I want to draw in people at an event. I want to draw in people or employees and have them, quote unquote, feel the Spirit. What is that? Like outside of the religious context, what is that? Is it a sense of feeling valued and appreciated? Is it the sense of someone caring about you despite your shortcomings? Like whatever those are, and if I had to relabel what that was, how do I create that in a work environment? How do I create that in areas of life where I can uplift people, and maybe I don't have to put the label of, it's the Spirit of Christ. It's called, it's the service. It's you seeing your divine nature. It's you seeing the value of what you bring to the table. It's you having unified purpose around a greater cause than oneself. Whatever that is, those principles are true. And so how do I have those show up throughout my entire life? And I've even, challenged my thought process. You'll hear Christ has a label of the master teacher. And one of my responsibilities is learning and development for a company. All right, master teacher. If Jesus was perfect and he's a master teacher, then I should have a model in the Bible that illustrates the best way to teach people, regardless of the subject, right? Right? And so because of that, I have looked at how Christ teaches to kind of reverse engineer it and say, okay, well, if Christ was teaching soft skills and leadership mindsets, or he was teaching technical training, how would he do it if he's so perfect? Right? And so it's been great to look as a guide to how we show up in the world. And I don't know, there's so much opportunity that way. We just have to change our mind shift a little bit and look at it differently as a guide of principles that is transcendent to all areas of life. And I nerd out about it, and I think it's super fun to do.
You know why I like this so much though, Kipp, is because one of the issues that I often see is this passivity in people that attend church. It's so passive. And I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, when you said, well, it has to be the Spirit that brings people into the gospel or brings people into the fold, a lot of people won't do what you do. They'll just use it as an excuse. There's nothing I can do about it. If it's meant to be, then the Spirit will invite itself, and it's on the Spirit. Or you'll also hear guys say, one thing, I hate this. I cringe every time I hear it. If it's God's will.
I know. Me too.
I hate that phrase. I understand the sentiment of it, and I believe that God has his hand in all of my life. And yes, if it's God's will, some things will happen and other things won't, sure. But it's so passive. It's such a weak thing to say.
It's an excuse almost. Yeah.
It's an excuse. What do you mean? God's will is for you to work. God's will is for you to find something meaningful. God's will is for you to overcome suffering. Yeah, it is God's will. Now get your butt to work so you can actually move forward in his will. And I think that's why I like so much about what you're saying, is because you're reverse engineering it, so you're not using it as some passive statement, but a very assertive, proactive, okay, great, got it. Now how do I apply it? And I can really appreciate that.
Yeah. Mike Arndolfer, sorry, Mike. In the spirit of this month's Book of the Month, Essentialism, what criteria do you use to separate your critical tasks from your daily to-do list items?
Well, I write everything down. I think that's the first thing you need to do.
Yeah.
And
brain
I
dump
struggle.
It almost.
You have to.
Yeah.
You have to. And I have a system for doing that. So I've got the battle plan that I use. And then in addition to the battle plan, I have a notepad on my phone. And so what I will do maybe throughout the day, let's say I'm out running errands, or at night when I'm not at my desk and I think of something, I put it a to-do note on my phone. And then in the morning, I come and I write it all down here on my battle plan. And that's the first thing you need to do. If you don't do that, you're going to be so scatterbrained. You're going to be so distracted. Whatever's the most pressing at the moment will take priority because it's the thing in front of you right now and you can't think about anything else. But when I have my battle plan and somebody comes to me and says, hey, can I meet you or do this or can we talk about this? I can pull this up and say, nope, not today. But I can do it tomorrow. In fact, I had one of our guy, he does a lot of the web design for us, and he's working on some other programs that we're building out. He messaged me and he's like, hey, can we meet today? No, we can't.
Do it.
We can meet tomorrow. What you have to talk about is important and we have to address it, but I can't do it today.
Yeah.
So I have systems in place. I use a calendar. I have the battle planning app, and then I can just take a look at it and say, okay, is this going to work? The whole premise of essentialism is actually, no, this comes from a different book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. It's complementary. And the whole premise of that book is, what is the thing that you could be doing that would make everything else easier or make it obsolete? And if you can figure out what that is, then you should do that first.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So yeah, that's a litmus test that I use. And then I also ask myself, in the moment, what is the most important thing for me to be doing right now? And I can pull up my list and say, okay, here, I've got 10 things on my list today. And I already have them prioritized. So I know when you and I get off the phone, I already know what I'm going to do. And today actually was a great example. I've got a hard stop early. I texted you and I said, hey, can you meet early? If not, then we have to do a short podcast. That's just the way it's got to work. Yep. Sometimes it's going to work like that. Sometimes it isn't, but we make our situations and our changes based on what our battle plans say. So I live by this in the calendar. That does it for me.
Yeah, I follow the same, very similar pattern and process. This is back in the old Stephen Covey days, right? When I had my Stephen Covey planner. Right. He had a concept called a master task list. And the master was your brain dump. So it's like whenever you're walking around the house and you're like, oh, I need to fix that drawer, add it to the master task list. Oh, I got to do this, add it to the master task list. And I have a master task list for each role I play. So I have one for my role at work. I have a personal one. I have a husband one. I have a father one. And then on Sundays, I look at that master task list and I assign tasks for the week. And then at the beginning of the day, I have my hot sheet, right? My top ones for the day. And what's interesting about this, Ryan, that I want to bring up is we got to be self-aware, right? We got to understand what we're doing, and I don't even think people get that far, right? Where they're like, oh my gosh, my day was so busy. And they don't realize that at one moment they thought about doing the top item on that list. And they were confronted with a choice to do this thing that would take some time and not provide an immediate reward, or, you know what, I might just flip open my email really quick and bang out some 10 emails. Why would I do that? Oh, got it. I get a huge dopamine hit by just hurrying doing some emails because I get a quick reward that I'm doing something. And you will find yourself constantly chasing quick reward over the task that might take you an hour or two. And so just be aware of it, right? Be aware that that's what you're doing. I think that's a huge for me. And by the way, not only that, sometimes I purposely do the task I shouldn't do. Sometimes I go, you know what? I'm burnt out a little bit. I'm going to do this task over here that's not a top priority, but it's kind of fun. And it excites me. It's something I've been looking forward to doing today. And so I'll work on that, knowing that I'm going to blow 30 minutes, maybe an hour on this thing that's not the top priority, but I'm taking a break. And it's my break to the more difficult tasks. So I think self-awareness along with the systems is super important.
Well, and I've often taught about a concept of momentum as well. Sometimes it's hard to build up momentum. And depending on your circumstances and your personality, you could take this one of two ways. You could tackle the hardest thing first. A lot of people will say that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what it's required. Maybe you're motivated by that, or maybe you're running up against a deadline. So it's like, nah, I've got to do this now. And deadlines help me. If I know I have a deadline, I'll get it done. We all will.
Yeah.
Another way to build momentum is to do the easiest thing on your list. At least, to your point, it may not be the most pressing, but at least it gets the ball rolling and it gets you in the mindset of action. So I like what you said about intent, because that's what you're talking about. You're just talking about having intent behind it versus, I think the way most of us make decisions is based on emotional reactions.
Yeah.
So your wife comes to you and says, hey, hon, will you take out the trash? And you're like, God damn, I don't have time to do this, but yeah. And you just go take out the trash because you don't want to hear her nag you about it the rest of the day, or you don't want to have to deal with her being upset or whatever it might be. So you just do it. an employee comes in and is upset about something, and some of those things might need to be put out in the moment, but a lot of the times it's not required if you just set the expectation. Hey, hon, I will take out the trash, but I won't be able to do it until noon. Okay. I think most reasonable people can live with that, or she can do it herself if it needs to be done before noon. Or if an employee comes in and has something that maybe they want to talk with you about that's not super pressing, hey, is this something that we need to address immediately, or can we do this afternoon at 2:00? But that's the intent that you're talking about. But then there's this other side of it that we don't talk about, and those are the things that have to be done that we don't necessarily want to do, they aren't enjoyable, and they don't move the needle all that much. The example is emails. You might say to yourself, well, as Kipp, you were explaining that, my thought was, well, yeah, emails have to be answered.
Yep.
They do have to be answered. So in those things that have to be taken care of that aren't immediately pressing, I like to time block. So I'm not going to check my emails every day, all day, every chance I get. I don't even have notifications on my phone for that reason. But I will take from 1 to 1:30 or 1 to 2 or whatever required and crank through a bunch. Definitely do that. And the other thing you could do, obviously, is to delegate.
Yeah.
If it's something that has to be done, but you don't want to do it, you shouldn't do it, your time is spent better doing something else, find somebody to come in. Maybe it's an assistant. If it's around the house, enlist your kids. You don't need to be taking the trash out. You got 4 kids. One of them can take the trash out. You shouldn't do the dishes every night. Your wife shouldn't be vacuuming or cooking dinner by herself all the time or doing laundry. Like, you have other people in the household that need to contribute. They need to learn how to contribute, and you need a breather. So delegate.
Yeah, totally. Well, and there's an element of here is make and honor your commitments. Man, I can't count how many times I've seen someone get sideways in their job due to their inability to say no. So they'll softly commit to everything. Oh, can you do this, Ryan? Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. Yep. Can you do this? Oh, yeah. Sure. And then they drop the ball. And they're digging themselves their own ditch with not managing the expectations of their actual commitments. So that back to that intentionality, right, is super critical. Let me ask you this, Ryan, because I'm really curious. I don't think about this when I think essentialism. When I think about that book, my biggest takeaways from that book are different. What's your biggest takeaway from that book? Is it in this space of critical tasks, or is it in a different element of the book? I'm just curious.
No, for me with essentialism is where are we placing our priorities, and how easily distracted do we get with things that are nonsensical, or even other people's priorities. Is that a thing I even want to do, or is that a thing that Kipp's doing, so I think I should do it too?
Yeah.
And so essentialism to me is stripping away things that are not a priority to me, being deliberate and intentional about what I envision for my life, and then placing the right amount of effort and time and resources into the fewer things that are more important and going deep rather than staying on the surface.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. All right. Justin Webb, when reaching out for help or guidance from somebody further ahead in that specific area, how do you approach it so that you don't seem desperate, and also so you don't waste their time?
Okay, I love it. I really like this question because a lot of people get this wrong. And I'm going to share some pros and cons and some right ways to do it and some what I think are wrong ways. And the wrong ways might be a little critical or might make me sound a little ego inflated, but I'm doing it because I want you to see what works and what doesn't work. The first thing when reaching out to somebody for help, for guidance and direction, like you said, drop the whole part of it where you said, because I'm feeling desperate. Maybe you are. Like, maybe I've been there. Like, I've been in personal situations. Kipp, I've had conversations with you where I wouldn't say desperate, but distraught.
Yeah.
Concerned, worried, afraid.
Yeah. Stakes are high.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so I reached out and I'm like, man, this is what's going on. You're like, okay, cool. Like, here, let's talk about it. Let's work through it. But I didn't shy away from telling you that I was afraid of what might happen, or that I was concerned about it, or something that I'm afraid of or fearful of. I think you should be honest about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anything, it might help the feedback a little bit, knowing how serious it is to you. Yeah,
totally. Well, I remember when I was doing my financial planning stuff in the early years, I really struggled. And there was this guy in the office that was a great producer all the time. He always produced really well. I went to him and I said, hey, I need help. I don't know how to do this. And if I don't figure it out, I'm going to quit. I'm going to get out of the business. I was desperate. And I communicated it to him, and it was fine. So I think get over that. That's a little bit of ego. That's a little bit of, your pride speaking. It's okay to feel that way. In fact, just be honest. And that's a really good way to ask for feedback. Okay, so number one, drop that part. Number two, when doing it, ask for small investments of time. Okay, so for example, Kipp, if you and I are business acquaintances, we know each other, but not completely, but I know you're really good in the leadership realm, and I just took on a new leadership role. I'm not going to come to you and say, hey, man, can I come to one of your leadership courses? I don't have any money. Can I come for free and like do that for free and spend 3 days with you? Like, I have not earned the right to ask for that. But if I said, hey, Kipp, man, I'm in this new leadership role. Finances are tough right now. We don't know each other all that well. I just have one quick question.
Totally.
And I said, when I take on this role, I have one guy who I think might be a problem. What might be one thing I could say to him to assess that and maybe to deal with that? That's it. That takes very little time from you, very little effort, and it builds the bridge. It's one plank on the bridge. Now, here's the most important part. Especially when you're reaching out to successful people. They don't need your money. They don't need your praise. They don't need probably your connections. So a lot of guys won't do it because they're like, well, what can I do for that guy? Here's what you can do. Make him feel valuable. Yeah. So this is the best feedback I will give to anybody who ever asks and gets advice from a potential mentor. Let's take that scenario. So I reach out to you. I ask that one question. You share with me something. Here it is. Ready? I give you feedback. That's my gift to you. Yeah. So I send you an email back or maybe a text if I have your number. Kipp, I had that conversation last week with that guy. I used that phrase. Man, it worked great. And he was all on board. And things are actually pretty good right now. And I just wanted to tell you, thank you. That meant a lot to me. Appreciate it. Never underestimate that, because in absence of anything else you could give a mentor, you can always make him feel like he added value. And successful people thrive on being valuable. Yeah. So you have to close the loop. Too many people don't do this. I get the feedback, I go implement it, it works or it doesn't, and then you never hear from me again until 6 months when I feel like I want to ask you again for something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're less likely to get more feedback if I didn't know that you actually took what I gave you and applied it and you were workshopping it. Now you're just a guy looking for an easy fix and you're unwilling to do the work. So now I don't even want to speak into you at this point.
Yeah.
If
well,
I don't know
what
that.
It does? It does for these guys that are mentoring you. This is what they say. I like that guy.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's funny how that is, huh?
It's like, you know what? I like that guy. That's cool. Yeah. And you may not think anything of it again until they reach out again. But the other way that you can do this is, I have all sorts of ideas on this, but go to their conferences, go to their events, subscribe to their newsletters, share their content, engage with their content, ask thoughtful questions. Those type of things go a very long way. You need to get on their radar to some degree, and you need to figure out what it is that they're after and how you might be able to do that. And sometimes it might mean they're just trying to fill their conference up. Cool. When I started Order of Man, I was going to all sorts of conferences so I could meet people that I knew I wanted to meet but didn't have connections with. So there's a few things that I would suggest to you.
I love it. And when you serve people, like translation, when I give you advice and you give me feedback and I know it helped you, serotonin is released, and my liking you increases by default. But if I don't know that it created an impact or a change, who knows what, right? I had someone I gave some advice to, followed up immediately, just like you said. I loved it. 6 months later, sent me another message and says, hey, Kipp, I just got promoted, right? Because his whole thing was like, oh, I wanted to get into a leadership role. Dude, I felt so good about myself. I was like, yeah, like that is awesome. And
you were
I was
part of it.
Cheering him. Like I was excited for him. I liked him more, even more, because he shared with me that he got into that leadership role that he was trying to get into. Like, I don't know. And it made me feel great, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, you were part of the team. There's this other concept. I've explained this before, Kipp, but it's the Ben Franklin effect. You've heard me talk about this, where Ben Franklin he tested this theory that if he didn't like somebody or they didn't like him, there was friction in a relationship, he would ask to borrow a book.
Yeah, so they could serve him.
So he would borrow a book, he'd read the book, and then he'd return it promptly and on time and in good order. And then immediately, the likability factor, it broke down all that dislike. And I don't know, I'd have to think about this. I don't know if I've ever tried this with a mentor, but you could do something very simple, like let's say you go to an industry or a work conference, and the guy speaking is a great speaker, and he shares a concept on giving effective feedback to other people. And you get a chance to talk to him after the conference. You might say something like, hey, you know that part where you're talking about effectively communicating feedback to other people? Do you mind if I borrow that? I really like that. And I think that would make a lot of sense for me to share with other people.
Yeah.
Something as simple like that might go a long way in just breaking down some barriers. And you're being respectful. You're giving him good feedback. You're telling him he was valuable. Stuff like that's really powerful.
Well, and I can't help but think, Ryan, what is it that stops us from doing that? What stops me from going to the boss and going, hey, can I borrow a book from you? Right? Can I seek for advice? And we said it earlier, it's just your ego.
Ego. It is.
Just the ego. We're so damn concerned about what everyone thinks about us that we're unwilling to be in a position that we think like makes us look less than. And it's a lie anyway, because I wouldn't think any less of anybody in those circumstances. If anything, I think more highly of them.
You think more of them.
It's so crazy. Yeah.
I've actually been testing this deliberately at the gym, because I geek out on some of this stuff like you do on things as well. And I'm fascinated with the idea of building and creating relationships from nothing. It's interesting to me.
Yeah.
And at the gym, it's so easy, and guys don't do it. It's so easy to go to somebody and say, hey man, like I'm trying to improve my bench and it looks like you know what you're doing. Like, could you watch me do this set and then just give me like maybe 2 or 3 pointers? And I've done that at the gym. You know how many times men have scoffed at me? Like big, strong, tough men. 0. I don't even need you to do it. I do it as I'm curious. And all of them are like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. They jump in,
now you have a
give me their
relationship.
pointers. Boom, starter.
Yeah.
Like I had this guy today. I was at the gym this morning, and this guy comes up, and I saw him on the bench next to me, and he had 2 plates on, and I was doing some cable work, and I was walking over to get a drink, and he stopped me. He's like, hey man, do you mind spotting me? I'm like, yeah, no problem. How many are you trying to get? You need help off, whatever. And we get done. He racks the weight, and he's like, cool, thanks, man. I immediately like him more. I don't even know who he is. I like him more. He could be a complete asshole. I don't know, but I like him because he asked me for help. Isn't that weird?
It's so wild. It is
wild to me.
Well, and this is why, back to the question earlier about like integration of religion, right? What's the second commandment? Love your neighbor. Why do you think that is? Oh man, because it's through the service of my neighbor that I do what? I form relationships. I start caring for them, and they start caring about me. What do you know? right? Like a foundational element that causes people to get together, right? And to form stronger bonds is actually in this space of service.
Yeah. I love this. I was thinking about it even in the context of like dating. You know, there's all these pickup artists and they tell you like to be an asshole to a woman because she'll be more interested in you and use this line and like make fun of her. I'm like, what are we, 8? Like these are grown men. Mock her because then she'll feel inferior and then you'll be in a position of authority. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what kind of relationship is that going to be? Even if it works, what kind of relationship is that going to be? But it's not hard, guys. If you're in the market for a woman, and let's say you're at the grocery store, and you see an attractive woman, you're like, I'd really like to approach her. Let go of the ego, number one, and just ask a question. Let's say she's at she's over looking at onions, and the onions are right next to the avocados. Walk up to the avocados and start feeling the avocados and say, this is weird. This is going to be a weird question. I don't know how to pick out an avocado. Do you know how to do this? You know what you're doing, right? Yeah. It's so easy. It's such an easy icebreaker to let go of the ego and just ask a question and ask for help. And people, barring very minor exceptions, are more than willing to help out if you ask.
And you end up getting the right avocado.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Worst case.
You thought I was going to say something sexual or something, didn't you?
Well,
you were giggling over there, man.
I was laughing because I'm imagining you're like, oh, ask some girl, like, okay, and I'm imagining she's in like the tampon aisle, and you're like, hey, so you on your period?
So what's it like having a period?
What condoms do you prefer? Do not do that.
Somebody will actually do that. Somebody will actually do that. Oh my gosh.
Oh, shoot. All right. Joe Gunter, pros and cons about buying property in Apple Valley near Hurricane and St. George. I have an opportunity to buy some property which fits into my 5-year vision and retirement plans. The area is nice, but growing rapidly. So advice?
Yeah.
Get some property over by Ryan.
Yeah. Did he say that it would be a primary residence or an investment? Did he say that? Okay.
No, he just said property, Apple Valley.
Yeah, I mean, the pros are Apple Valley is amazing. It's a little bit out there, so I think it's a little bit further away from some amenities you might need, but it's growing rapidly, like you said, so I don't think it'll be too long before.
15 years ago, what was out there was now like part of the middle of St. George, so.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's crazy.
So it might be far enough out there that the property values are lower than what you might find in other parts of southern Utah. I think those are all pros. It's a great area to live. Crime is low, pretty moderate weather, great outdoors, good school systems, a very religious community, which I think, broadly speaking, is a good thing. Christian values, that's a good thing. Whether you agree with the predominant religion or not, it's still a good thing for the community.
Absolutely.
I think the cons are that it's just expensive right now. The market is just expensive right now. And at some point, I think the bottom will fall out. We do this every like 10 to 15 years where people are like, oh, property values are just going to go up forever. And then people are like shocked when the bottom falls out every 10 to 15 years. Like you see it in the stock market, you see it in real estate, you see it in tech. So just be prepared for that. Don't get in over your head. I've been looking for a couple of rental properties and it doesn't make sense. I would never recoup my investment on some rental property prices. So I'll just put my cash elsewhere into businesses right now. And then when the opportunities arise, I'll invest in real estate. But if you have a good opportunity, and it's the right time for you and you're in the position to do it, I don't see any downside. It's a great area, and I think it's going to continue to grow, especially as people move away from California. A lot of people coming to here, moving away from mostly the West Coast would move here to Utah, so it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah. All right. Elijah Elliott, we have all heard the saying, choose your battles. What should we consider when making this choice?
Well, I would say, number one, do you care about it?
Yeah.
Because it sounds funny, but sometimes I'm stubborn and hard-headed and I like to be right. So I'll dig in my heels on things I don't even care about.
Is what, like, you'll get latched on to caring about winning the argument, not about the subject,
the issue. Yeah,
got it.
So I think actually ask yourself that, especially if it's something small like on social media. I've done this a million times where I type a comment. I'm like, what? No, what are you doing? Don't. And you guys would be surprised that I actually delete comments based on the comments you see me make. Yeah, I actually delete comments. Yeah. So yeah, if it's just not important to you, just ignore it. Like, don't even waste your time on it. I think that's number one. I also think when choosing your battle, I want to engage in battles that I can win. Not interested in engaging in battles that are going to take a bunch of time, energy, resources, and distract me from other things that are more winnable. Yeah. And I think that's just true of whether we're talking about a physical battle, an altercation, or some social issue that you're concerned about. If it's something that you can't win, okay, then, or even define what victory would look like. But I think determining the probable outcome of the battle is something you should consider. Now, just because you can't win per se doesn't mean you shouldn't engage in it. I think that there's an opportunity to change the tide of what it means to be a man and how society generally views manliness and masculinity. But in a lot of ways, over the past 10 years, we've actually seen a decline in it.
Yeah.
Am I still willing to fight that battle? Even if I know that it will continue to decline? Yes, absolutely. It's that important to me. So it's not a deal breaker. It's just a consideration.
I find this interesting. I had a breakthrough 2 weeks ago around this subject. 5 years ago, we moved offices. We moved into this big office. And when we were remodeling the third floor, I cared. I cared about the carpet. I cared about how we're going to do the ceiling. I cared about the kind of desks. I cared about the common area, what the couches look. I cared. We have since bought the building, and we're building out another section of the building to expand, right? Because we keep growing. And the chief of staff says, "Hey, Kipp, do you care to be involved?" And I went, "No, not at all." And I thought about it. I'm like, that's interesting. 4 years ago, I was fighting to be at the table to care about what the office looked like. Now I'm like, don't even talk to me about it. Leave me out of it. Why? Because I'm about something bigger. So, Elliot, I know you're not asking this question, right? But it's a lot easier to choose our battles when we know what battles we're fighting. When we're about a battle. And you'll find this with people all the time that don't have anything going on in life. Guess what? They'll create battles. They'll create battles in their relationships. Yeah. They'll create battles with their family. They'll create all kinds of drama in their life. They will fight to find battles. Why? Because they haven't chosen one. So part of knowing what choices to make is by being intentional with the battles that we are taking on. So when other things show up, we're like, not worth my time. I'm about something else. And now we're operating in a intentional way about something bigger, and not just every argument that comes to our table, we want to argue about it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And, the other side of it is being passionate too about something, because when you said that about, hey, I'm not interested because I'm about something bigger, somebody actually is thinking the same way about designing that office space that you are about whatever you think is bigger.
And I was 4 years ago, right? I cared. Yeah.
So it's not to dismiss the fact that it's not big. It's just that it's not a priority or something you're passionate about. I was in the financial planning business for a lot of years with a friend of mine. His name's Greg Black. And Greg and I did a lot of work together. And I eventually got out of business. I wasn't really passionate about it. And I started talking about Order of Man. And it was interesting because I had this revelation that the way that I was talking so passionately about Order of Man and less passionately about the business, the financial planning business, he was just as passionate as I was about financial planning. So I think the passion, the excitement, the enthusiasm is a pretty good indicator that you're onto something. And it really doesn't matter what other people think or what they think of what you think is important.
Totally. All right, we have time for one more. You got one more?
Okay, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Chad Scott, for someone who doesn't have hobbies and a lifetime of doing it on their own without friendship mentality, do you have any tips on establishing friendships as a man?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to find, well, you say you don't have hobbies. You certainly have interests, right? There's things that you're interested in. And so take the first step into the thing that you're interested in.
Yeah.
It's really as simple as that. If there's something that you're excited about, something that you are even remotely interested in, go do that. Now, here's the difference. Because I do talk about that a lot, because you're going to find people in those things. If it's jujitsu or hiking or training or lifting, you're going to find people. But to my point earlier, you actually have to go out of the way to extend yourself and form those friendships. You can't just show up and expect that people are going to flock to you like you're God's gift to whatever it is. Like you have to extend yourself. You have to put forth effort. And so if you're at jujitsu, you have to ask the guys, hey, is there anything going on around here? Or you're at the gym, you have to ask for people to give you feedback. Or if you're running or taking photography lessons, ask for feedback. Get involved with those guys. At church, don't just show up, like actually be engaged in what those guys are doing. And I think if you do that, you'll find pretty easily that there's a lot of men who actually want to form friendships, but they're saying the same thing as you. We don't know how.
Totally.
So be the guy that puts yourself out there, gets outside of your comfort zone, drops the ego, and takes a risk.
And we want to have friendships with who? People that are kind of aligned with us. And what I'm excited about this question for Chad is he has no idea what's coming for him, because I checked here. Chad just signed up for the Iron Council. He's in the Forge right now. I'm like, Chad, done, right? Like, you're going to get on a battle team. You're going to get with like-minded guys that are about things in life. You just started that step in forging those friendships and bonds with really strong, like-minded individuals that are going to not just be your friend, but play a role in uplifting you in your life at the same time.
Yeah. Well, again, as long as you're willing to work for
That's
it.
true. I guess it is possible for him to.
Right. And a lot of people will. You know, even when they join the Iron Council, they'll show up and think, well, I showed up, here I am.
Someone.
It's like when people move to a new town and they get frustrated because nobody introduced themselves and they think, oh, people around here are rude. I'm like, nobody around your place, they're not rude. They're just busy. They just have their own lives. They're distracted. They're not rude. How about instead of complaining that they're being rude, how about go out of your way to introduce yourself? Well, I shouldn't. Well, shouldn't has nothing to do with it. Of course you should. If you want to know who that person is, then you have to go over and introduce yourself to that person.
Yeah.
And if you want to make the most of your Iron Council experience, then you have to do the work and connect and do all of those things. Like, it's just the reality of it, just how it works.
Yeah,
exert
absolutely.
yourself.
Well, the Iron Council's closed, so if
it
you
is
were
closed,
interested,
with all that said,
you're going to have to wait until next quarter.
Yeah.
But we do have the Men's Forge event that's coming up May 1st through the 4th. To learn more about that event, go to themensforge.com. And as always, connect with Mr. Michler on X and Instagram at Ryan Michler. Anything else, sir? Call to actions.
Nope, that's it. I mean, we'd love to see you out there. We've got some great interviews coming up. We did one yesterday with Scott Payne, former FBI special agent, 30 years almost undercover with some crazy, notorious gangs and Nazis and drug traffickers. So that was a really good one. And then next week will be Kurt Cameron. A lot of you guys know Kurt Cameron from his acting days, but he's an advocate for men in the family unit. Met with him in Nashville a week or two ago. So that one will be next week. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast because we've got some good ones coming out very, very soon.
Awesome.
Cool. Kipp, appreciate you, man. And guys, I appreciate you. Great questions today, as always. It seems like our questions have been getting better and better lately. I don't know if you have felt that, but it feels like we were getting some solid questions, and I'm grateful. We've got a lot over on Facebook that we'll get to next week, guys. But until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.